Good morning, Anne Marie. How are you?
I'm well. Good morning, and good morning to everyone joining us today from wherever you are in the world.
Yes, I love it. We're going to be talking about authentic communication today. Anne Marie and I yesterday did a 3-hour training for a longtime client of Anne Marie's and now a client of ours. And it was on the topic of executive presence. And I was sort of struck as we were running through all that content, Anne Marie, how much of what we're talking about today really dovetails with the idea of executive presence and really kind of informs pretty much everything that we do, both as a company and everything that you all do, as people, as professionals. All of this content will have application across, various parts of your life. If you are new to Story Imprinting, we are a company that's devoted to teaching great people and great humans the art and science of storytelling, as well as how to be better leaders and better humans. We do training, and we also have a communication side of the business. And we design these free webinars as a way for folks to just kind of get a little taste of how we train, what our content is like. And so we're so glad that you found us. We're so glad that you're here with us today. And Anne Marie, this is didactic. So we want you to bring your questions. Don't wait till the end because we want you to ask them in the moment. So please use the chat, use the Q&A. In fact, as we dive into the content, if you're here with us live, drop into the chat who you are, where you're from, why you're here. And I am going to get us rolling, Anne Marie. Is that good?
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Let's do it. So let's start by talking a little bit about why it matters in general and this notion of authentic communication. And, we should probably define it a little bit. I think, we talked a lot about this yesterday. For us, authentic communication is being a truth teller. And that sounds very obvious, except when you think about the amount of times you avoid a conversation, any difficult conversation, you avoid difficult feedback. These things really sort of indicate the ways in which we don't necessarily lie, but we're not actually telling the truth all of the time. And when you don't do that, you degrade the possibility for trust and credibility and influence and connection. So authentic communication matters so much because you want to influence people. You want to have authority, credibility. You want to keep people at your organization. It helps to develop culture. If you're in an environment where people don't believe they're going to get a straight answer, where they don't believe they're getting good quality feedback, where they don't believe somebody is telling the truth, what happens is inevitably they feel uncertain and imbalanced all of the time. So quality communication impacts everything, internally, externally, in every way, shape, or form. It's also a hell of a lot harder than you think. I often quote George Bernard Shaw, who said, the most extraordinary thing about communication is that it occurs at all. It's hard. And frankly, it makes us vulnerable, and that's uncomfortable, which is why authentic communication is more challenging than we think. We always mention this when we're talking about authentic communication and leadership, and I want to mention it here. If you have not seen Arne Sorensen, the CEO of Marriott, who is no longer with us, do his direct-to-camera video about the pandemic and its impact on Marriott and the very difficult decisions they had to make around cutting staff and so on. He was battling cancer at the time. We highly encourage you to watch that video. It is a masterclass in how to address hard situations in an open, authentic way as a human. Anything else to add here, Holly?
No, but you can now chat. So thank you very much, Beth. For some reason that was disabled. So now you should be able to chat with us. I was like, this is such a quiet group. Where are they? So thank you.
Yeah. So hey, y'all, say hello to us. Tell us where you are in the world. Say good morning in the chat and where you're from. We want to hear you. And we are happy that you're here. You could be anywhere this morning. So we're happy to have you. If you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. We're super happy to respond to them.
Yes, and Mariana, the video that Anne Marie mentioned you can find it on YouTube. It's Arne, A-R-N-E Sorensen. He was the CEO of Marriott at the onslaught of the pandemic. And it is, as she mentioned, a total masterclass in authentic direct communication at a very challenging time when he frankly didn't have a lot of answers and really owned that. So it looks like we've got people from Minneapolis. Hi, Kathy.
Yeah, I love
Diego, St. Louis.
Hey, Beth in Chicago. And Ivy, we always love having you here. We just love that you're always here. So welcome, Ivy. Look at all our humans all over there. Oh, Mexico. Hey there. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. We really appreciate it.
And
And
Gabriella, I see your question. You can just Google, and I'll send it out with the link as well. But if you just Google Arnie Sorensen Marriott, it's like the first thing that pops up on YouTube or frankly in Google search. Okay, great.
Gigi is normally from San Diego, but she's vacationing in Boise, Idaho.
Love it.
Gigi, what are you doing up on in here today instead of just relaxing on your vacation? I don't know, but I'm feeling super honored. So thank you for that. We appreciate having you. So thank you everybody for being here.
All right, here we go.
So one of the things we like to say is that good, clear, authentic communication actually blocks and lowers anxiety and fear in the unknown. I think that the movie you have developed in your head, and be honest, if you've done this, how many of you have done this? You have to have a hard conversation and you are already like agitated, pissed off, angry, bitter about a conversation that has not yet happened.
Yes.
And so there's this entire movie in your head. Yeah, we've all been there. We've all done it. And it's just so typical of what happens. Amy's here. Sorry,
Hi,
I adore Amy. Hi, Amy Lansing. So, you know, one of the things we always say is a very common strategy for people is to build their tolerance instead of having the direct and honest communication. The only problem with that is a single strategy is that tolerance has a ceiling. And eventually you will reach yours. And inevitably what happens is instead of good quality communication about something hard, you explode or you leave or you become really ill because you're consuming this poison of rage and anger and sadness over whatever the problem is. And the other thing I would say is people can't create change unless they know there's a problem. So when we don't communicate with somebody, then they have no way of knowing. Yes, even jackasses. And I just want to say that because sometimes, you know, we talk about like, hey, like this person's just a jerk. I know how they're going to react. But the truth is you don't know how they're going to react because nobody's ever had the hard conversation. So, you know, what happens is also, I should say this, increasing your tolerance doesn't mean that this doesn't take up a huge amount of space. And, you know, those conversations you're not having, they're what you think about when you're showering in the morning. They're what you think about when you're driving around. They're what you think about when you wake up and you go to bed. So when you don't have those hard conversations, you're making everything more difficult. Holly, I don't know if you want to add something to this.
2 things. 3 a.m. says Ivy. I hear you, Ivy. So I have 2 things to add. You know, reforming people pleaser, because I feel like it's like a lifelong thing. If you're a people pleaser, and you feel so moved, drop it in the chat so I feel not so alone up here on the internet. But I think we have a lot of clients who sort of for a variety of reasons. Thank you, Ivy. I appreciate you popping in there. You know, they're people pleasers. They contort themselves relentlessly to make sure that everyone else around them is okay. And often this takes the form of like, you know, it can be subtle. It can be, you know, I'm a manager and I really want to protect my people, you know, and so I'm gonna sort of contort myself at all costs and sort of take all the flack and take all the bullets for these people because there's toxic leadership ahead. I mean, I frankly, like in one of my previous jobs, had direct reports and I wanted to shield them from a toxic culture above me. And I sort of bent over backwards trying to make those toxic people happy so I could protect the people that were reporting into me. And that is also not a sustainable strategy, right? It leads to exactly what Anne Marie mentioned. I mean, I remember being pregnant with my first daughter in this job, waking up at like 3 and 4 in the morning and sending emails and doing things to protect these folks that I was working for because I wanted to make sure that everyone else around me was okay. And it took an enormous toll on my health. So people pleasing is can be tied, and we do a whole, you know, entire trainings around sort of this idea of cognitive behavior, and that this is all rooted in you know, lots of formative experiences throughout my life. That's why I am, that's why I was that way for so long. You have to be able to identify it, right, Anne Marie? I mean, you have to be able first to say, like, this is a pattern. I recognize this pattern, and it is manifesting in me avoiding conversations that I need to have, or giving really honest and direct feedback to someone, or even being able to receive feedback in a really honest and open way. So that's the first point I wanted to make. The second thing I wanted to say is more of a question. I'd love to hear from you, Anne Marie. So what if someone is watching this and they're like, yes, I praise, like authentic communication, I want to do all these things, but I'm in a culture in which that is neither embraced nor welcomed nor modeled. How do you, what is your response to that? Because that can also be something we tell ourselves to keep ourselves from doing the thing.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great and important question. And I want to first address something Beth said in the comments, which is I'm very risk averse or very averse to confrontation. I don't see hard conversations as confrontation. I see them as information. And so how you approach and define these conversations determines whether or not you even have them at all. If you see them as conflict, you're not going to have them because conflict is scary. But if you see them as something that can improve a relationship, deepen a relationship, improve an environment and a culture, then you're more likely to have them. So some of these is about sort of changing your belief system around, is this conflict? Why? Why is it conflict to have a hard conversation? And really challenge yourself to re-examine and reframe that. And that will make things a hell of a lot easier. Now, to get back to what Holly was saying, if you're in a culture that doesn't support this, then I never sort of, for those of you who are less familiar with us than others, I kind of have a no bullshit kind of approach to things. And if you're in a really toxic culture, you are one person and you cannot change that culture. And you have to really determine if you want to be in that culture. You, however, can change how you respond inside of that culture. But I would be lying to you and I would be totally dishonest if I didn't tell you that you are limited by the culture that you're existing in. That's just the reality. If you're in a toxic environment, we've worked with many, many clients in the context of coaching where they're just in environments that are completely untenable. They're verbally aggressive. They are toxic. I mean, there's a limited amount of things you can do. And what you really need to do is work on your interior strength to leave. And I say that because, you know, I do a lot of negotiation, salary negotiation coaching as well. And, you know, we often get somebody who will say, well, what if they say X, Y, or Z? And my response is always, then you know. And
Right.
do you want to be working for an organization that pays you beneath your worth? Listen, we get people all the time who are like, you're how much for training or whatever? We don't have that. We're like, no problem. Like,
Right.
I mean, we have to deal with this too. So it's not as if we don't also have to address these issues. But I would just say, if you're really, you know, existing inside of a toxic culture, whatever that culture may be, a family of origin, your current relationship, friendships, you are limited by the weakest link in that culture. And there's only so much you can do, but you have to also determine who you are in the world. And do you want to cower to that environment, or do you want to be a truth teller? However, you can be punished for that. It's hard and it's exhausting.
Yeah. Thank you.
So we like to talk a lot about this idea of narrative vulnerability. And I think that it's important because we lived in a time where executive presence and communication was all about this facade of perfection. And really, we are moving into an environment for several reasons, in my own opinion. Part of it is the pandemic. Part of it is I think we have a younger generation that is less amenable to this idea of a manufactured, polished, sort of idealized, you know, sort of concept of perfection. And, you know, the truth is, I mean, perfectionism in general is a form of trauma response.
Yeah.
This idea that if I do everything right, I am perfect, everybody loves me, then I am worthy, then I am lovable, that I can, that I will be okay and accepted. That is an inhuman standard. And vulnerability, again, the Arne Sorensen piece is a gorgeous expression of vulnerability. He is emotional. He is not sort of repressing that emotional response, but allowing it to breathe and be there. I gave this example yesterday. I frequently give it. I think it's important. We work with, particularly from a coaching standpoint, a lot of women and historically marginalized people. And I would say, listen, these environments that we're all working in were not built by or for us. And the idea of having a manufactured facade and being impenetrable was sort of the standard of leadership, the standard of executive presence. But as we enter these places, we have an opportunity to reframe what these systems look like and how we behave inside of them. When my mom was dying in the middle of the pandemic, Holly and I would get on a call with huge clients, Bank of America, BDO, Latham and Watkins. And I would start those calls by saying, thank you so much for inviting us on this call today. We are delighted to speak with you. And I also want to let everybody here know my mom is actively dying downstairs. She is in hospice. I may be torn away at any moment, at which point Holly will take over the rest of the time in this meeting. I thank you in advance for your understanding. Let's move forward. Did I have to do that? No, Holly could have just taken over, right? And could have excused me. She could have done that. She's great at that. But it was important to me that we just honestly talk about what was going on. I mean, everybody's in our homes now in these meetings. And for me, it was really about I don't want to exist in a system that believes I have to pretend my mother isn't dying, because she is. And I am doing this work and my mother's dying. Both of these things are true. And so I just invite, and by the way, I want to say this, I always got emails every single time from people on those calls that just thanked me saying, hey, when my dad died, I was crying in the bathroom alone every day and I didn't know how to deal with that at work. I don't want to live inside of that culture. Do you? But in order to change it, we have to behave differently. Holly, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously completely agree with everything that you're saying. I think, having come up through law firm culture, especially, 15 years ago, this idea wasn't talked about, right? I mean, and I think to your point, there's been a groundswell, both I think generationally. There's a lot more scholarship around this. Obviously Brene Brown is a great example, but there are others. And the pandemic, the great resignation, the great migration of people sort of reshuffling around the country, people are really reevaluating what they want, and authentic connections with those with whom they work are at the top of the list. Yesterday we did this presentation on executive presence to a large client, and I was normally we're not big statistics people, right? We're storytellers, but I did want to share that the Association for Talent Development, which is the big sort of preeminent global organization around leadership development and training, had recently done this survey mid-year 2022, right? So this is not totally lagging data. This is recent data. And the results of this survey of workers was staggering. People feel more confident than ever before that they can move around, that they can get a job just as good as the one they have, that pays just as much as the one they have, if not more. And a staggering percentage, in the 90s, 91%, I think, of those people said that authentic relationships were the most important sort of determinant as to whether they were going to stay. It's not, everybody wants to talk about work from home and all flexibility. That all matters, but people really want and crave authentic connections. When Anne-Marie, when you were talking about your mom, I mean, I remember being a young lawyer and my aunt, who was very close to me, died, and she died suddenly, and she was in Indiana and I was in California. And I did not feel empowered to even mourn that loss in any kind of public way. And to your point, cried in the bathroom, was not given the ability to fly home, I wasn't given the time off work. And that's one of my deep regrets, right? Yeah. And I think that is just so no longer the paradigm within which we're working. And so being able to embrace this idea of authenticity and vulnerability in your communication is incredibly important. We also, I love asking you questions in real time in these sessions. I'm going to do it again.
I hope you do.
Because I also know there might be somebody watching who's I don't want to overshare. I don't want to be the person, right? So let's draw this distinction about, let's really draw a clear line about what we mean about this, right?
So, to go back to this example of my mother, I'm not crying on a video conference,
right,
expressing every emotion. I'm stating a fact. My mother is downstairs dying in hospice. It is a fact. So nobody's asking you to process my emotional response to that, what I am doing is saying, this is what's actually happening right now, so that we can all behave like humans if I need to step away from this call. And, I remember the first time I did it, I didn't tell Holly I was going to do it. And then I texted her. I was like, hey, I just decided, like, and she was like, listen, if we're going to lose a client because that's something that you decide to just share, we don't need that client. Like those are not our people, which is why Holly and I are partners, because we share the same values. We get to shape what our company and our business looks like and the level of heartbeat it has and authenticity. And I would just say to all of you, if you're being really honest right now, and I would love to hear from you, and you don't have to share with us what, or you could share with us in private chat. It doesn't have to be public. But right now, I want you to sit there and write down any conversation you're avoiding. Maybe it's with your partner, maybe it's with your kid, maybe it's with a parent, an aging parent, maybe it's with a colleague, a friend, it can be your client that you have not had a hard conversation with about needing to raise fees or whatever it is. And I want you to think about how that makes you feel and the way it creates a wedge in your relationship. It creates distance. So this idea, inauthentic communication is about distance. It's about not having connection. It's about not having trust. So I understand that these things are hard. In no way are we suggesting they're easy, but there is a cost, a high cost to pay for not having authentic communication. So you have to really think about the ways in which you want to express your vulnerability. Telling people that about my mother dying, it didn't impact the quality of my work. My work was still stellar. It just was a fact of my existence. And I want to say right now, and if any of this touches you at all, again, please drop it in the chat or private message on this call, right? On this webinar right now, we have a group of people. I promise you, someone is dealing with potential divorce, mental illness in their family, drug addiction in their family, learning ability, fertility issues, aging and dying parents, all of these things and so much more. Right now, everyone is dealing with that. Do we want to live in a world where we are sensitive to that and people's human experience? Or do we want to live in a world where we're all repressing that and pretending that isn't who we are? I think that when we have that level of compassion and sincerity, we create systems and cultures that have more connectivity and that feel like we can breathe and be our full selves. To Holly's point, and we cannot hit this strong, nobody's asking you to process everything, in your work environment. We're merely saying that this allows people to be their full engaged selves. And I think they're more productive also, which I think is not for nothing.
Yeah, I agree. Language.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about this, Holly?
Yeah, I mean, it changed my life when I heard it for the first time, I'm sure. So this language, I encourage you to take a little screenshot of the slide, write this down. This language will help you in so many settings. And so many. I mean, I can think of like 5 examples offhand in my personal and professional life where I've used this. So as Anne-Marie mentioned, there's a great quote, right? One of the amazing things about communications is that it happens at all. You could sit me and my husband down and tell us the same list of facts, and then we both would have heard different things, right? This happens all the time. I could ask him to do something and he could totally have heard something totally different, right? This language will save you every time. This is what I hear you saying. Is that accurate? Because when you're using this language, someone on the other end may say, like, no, that's actually not at all what I said. I mean, Anne-Marie and I use this, variations of this a lot. It's sort of goal posting and making sure that we're all on the same page. When I was a young lawyer, again, law firm culture 15 years ago, I think certain things remain, but it was different. And I did not feel, because of the power imbalances between partners and associates, I felt like I needed to go into a partner's office, get my little assignment and write it all down. Because that's what I was told, right? Like, you take your notebook and you write everything down and don't ask a lot of questions and then get out of there. So I would get, a download from a partner with direction to do something. And I literally had not even left the office yet. And I was thinking in my head, is this what he wants me to do? I think he wants me to do this, but I don't want to go back because I don't want to look stupid and I don't want to look incompetent. And so then I would just go waste a ton of time that was later written off and not billed to the client because I was sort of futzing around internally trying to figure out what the hell it was that he wanted me to do. Had I had this language, this is what I hear you saying, John, is that accurate? He would have had the opportunity right then and there in real time to say no, yes, to validate. So the validation language is really, really, really key to strong communication, right? So being able to move forward and execute on whatever a plan is, whether it's personal, professional. This language changed my life. I mean, I use it all of the time in a variety of settings. And I cannot say enough, I would encourage you, if you take nothing else from what we've said today, take this language and use it this week somewhere with someone. It could be a very low stakes conversation. It doesn't have to be, some meeting with your boss or with your board. Use the language and really sit in how that feels, right? To either have been validated with your understanding of what the communication was about, or to have been redirected. I think it's really, really empowering. And
how many times have all of you been in an argument with your partner and you're like, well, you said, and you sort of, and they're like, that's not what I said. I mean, this happens all of the time. That isn't what I said. But if you start with, this is what I hear you saying, you can stop that reactivity before it happens. And also, this is a great tool, by the way, if you're not thinking about it, for salary negotiation, for business development. It's not just conflict related, or just any communication you're having at all about anything. This really helps inform your capacity to make sure that there's clarity and you're operating from the same position. If you're already not actually landing what's going on, and again, this happens constantly on a daily basis, constantly. So this is not a unique situation. This happens to Holly and I. We were at lunch yesterday and she was just like complaining about some technical issue. And I'm like, well, do you want to change providers? And she's like, no, I'm just, I'm just saying this is frustrating. Okay, great. But we have to have that conversation, because I don't know if she's just like blowing off steam or she wants to make a decision. I have no idea. But you have to ask those questions. Are you saying X or are you saying Y? That's not because she's a poor communicator or I'm a poor listener. It's just because how we're processing information. I just used this example yesterday. I'm going to use it real quickly here. We don't have a lot of time. So, I want to be super respectful of everybody's time, and I don't want to go over. And I think did somebody have their hand raised or have a comment?
Sherry had her hand raised, and I didn't know, Sherry, if you wanted to talk live, which I can allow you to do, or if you had a question you wanted to put in the chat.
Sherry, talk to us.
Chat us here. I'm going to let you talk live, Sherry. And you're free to talk, Sherry, if you want to, or you could just chat us. She might have just been doing
maybe she's high-fiving us.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks for the high five, Sherry. And if you decide you have a question, please drop it below. And by the way, we are winding down. So if you have a question or comment, please be sure to drop it in the chat. We really want to be able to answer those questions and comments. We know that this is 30 minutes. You could have been doing anything and you shared it with us. So we wanted to make sure, we always want to make sure it's worth your time. With this said, we want to just sort of say we all deserve authentic communication. And the reason this is here is because Holly and I do a lot of executive coaching, and the amount of times one of us gets a client who is like, and this and this and this, and they have this laundry list. And the very first question we always ask is, have you had a conversation with this person? I'm going to say my own statistic is about 95% of the time the answer is no.
Yeah.
So you can't fix something if you're not talking about it. And that other person, even if they're super difficult, they don't even know that you're upset. A really good rule is don't talk about someone, talk to someone. And if you catch yourself talking about someone, if you catch other people talking about someone, push back and ask them to talk to that person about it instead of to you. Yeah, I love Gigi said, making sure we're on the same page is important, but also you need to make sure you're in the same book. Yeah, for sure. Undoubtedly. undoubtedly. I mean, this is the thing that I think is really difficult, and it's aligning and making sure, but you have to be brave enough to be vulnerable, right? And these are just really practical tips. We're really about sort of actionable, practical tips. These are all things that you can do to sort of pay more attention. If you want to take something away today and be super actionable, as Holly said, that language around validation is really important. And the other thing I would say is just think of just one conversation that you've been avoiding, just one, and have that conversation. It might be small stakes, but that's how you build that muscle. Not everybody can go and ask for, more money today from their boss in a salary negotiation. But, maybe you can ask your neighbor not to park so close to your car or whatever it is. Like whatever that small thing is that you've been avoiding that's causing you some suffering that you're carrying around, the way to alleviate that suffering is to have the conversation. So that's what we hope you do. So we really want you to stay connected to us, and we really want to keep doing this work. And we really want to offer you valuable content. So there are a couple of things to do. Please connect with us on LinkedIn. We have a story imprinting page. You also can make sure that you connect to us individually. You can follow us on Instagram. We would love for you to go on YouTube and subscribe. Please make comments. The YouTube gods love that. We appreciate it as well. These are all ways we want to make sure that we're connected to you. Please also feel free to message us privately after this and share with us any other content you are really hungry for us to cover, because this is really for you. So if you have some things, please let us know. Let's see, we have some comments. Do we want to go over these real quick? Love the
yeah. Okay, Sherry, Sherry's with us. Thank you, Sherry. She says, key point, sometimes people need to talk about others to vet, process, and prepare for the direct, hard conversation with the person. I think there's a very important distinction to be made here, right? I think there's a difference between preparing for a hard conversation, like Anne Marie is one of my dear friends. If I need to have a hard conversation with someone else, I frequently will go to her for her counsel and her advice, right? What I'm talking about, and Anne Marie, I think it's the same for you, is we all know the person that goes around the office sort of just talking and venting relentlessly to anyone within earshot or anyone within the department. That is toxic. That is not in service to the person that you're having a hard conversation with, right? I certainly understand the need to vent, but we're really talking about not sort of walking around and having these conversations wildly in a way that can turn really toxic.
And I would just say, like, how do you measure that? I would not be talking about this stuff in groups.
Right.
Talking with one person is one thing. If you're going to process with somebody or they're going to process with you, then what's the action plan? So that it's not just sort of, we're just going to roil in this mess, but like, what are we going to do about it? And what's the next step to have a conversation? Otherwise, it can very easily become this codependent, gossipy situation that's just about complaining, that's not about creating change. And I don't think that that's actually very valuable or useful, but I think that's an important distinction to make for sure. So thank you so much. Please be sure to connect with us on all of the social medias, and also be sure to reach out to us. We'll be having another session next month, and we're happy to answer any questions. And we very much look forward to your contributions on the content that you would like next. So thank you so much.
Thanks, y'all. Take care. Bye, Anne Marie.
Bye-bye. Thanks.